Hello, everybody. Welcome to tomorrow. It's great to see all of you here. We are going to have a very interesting show today, talking a little bit about the future of NASA and some of the big breaking news that has come out this week. Jared Isaacman was nominated to be the next NASA administrator, and the current NASA administrator gave an update about the Artemis program and some of the problems that they have had, as well as what they plan to do about it and the delays that have now been applied to the next SLS launch, and many things about the Artemis program are called into question. So, joining me today, we have Dutta back after a brief vacation that he's had. I'm also joined by Ryan Caton. We should have a Jared a little bit later today. He's having a couple of technical issues, so if he's able to join us a little bit later, great, because I would definitely love to hear his opinions about it as well. But first, before we go through,
he's stuck in the airlock.
He's having some of his own Eclipse problems right now. Oh man! In any case, Ryan, how you doing? It's great to see you. I'm sure you have quite a few thoughts about this week.
Yeah, it's been one of those weeks. Let's put it that way. It's definitely been one of those weeks. We have NASA essentially is I think on the brink of one of perhaps the biggest shake-up the agency has ever seen since it was formed just before or at the start of the space race, shall we say? Put my teeth back in at the end of the 50s. So I'm personally a big supporter and fan of the private spaceflight endeavors that Jared Isaacman has conducted with Inspiration 4, which the first, all-civilian mission, private people on a private rocket, and then the beginnings of the Polaris program with Polaris Dawn, the first private EVA, the first private spacewalk, and then just an incredible amount of scientific discovery and experiments conducted on those missions. And then, to top it all off, the missions are designed to support St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, making life on Earth better for those through fundraising and through experiments done in space. So, I've always been a huge supporter of him and his endeavors within the sector. And I'll be honest, this is a bit like a dream. Because I remember on the show, back when we did our little post-nationwide poll show in November, we were like, oh, who do you think is going to be NASA administrator? And we were like, oh, Jared Isaacman would be a great administrator, but that's never going to happen. Maybe Jim Bridenstine will come back because he turned out to be a pretty good administrator as well through his enthusiasm for space and all of that. So it's very, to me, maybe I was just blind and I didn't see it coming, but to me, I find this very, very surprising because, again, maybe this is me, but if you look at Jared's social media posts, it's like, I can't tell who he voted for, right? It seems like this kind of middle of the road, not like an extreme supporter of either candidate guy who I think will be able to reach across to both, the Democrat side and the Republican side of Congress, and hopefully, fingers crossed, be able to have that mentality and that enthusiasm and just that ability to just finally get stuff done, because that's kind of what NASA needs right now. They need someone who is able to give them a bit of a shove and get them going, because the direct flip to that is the next day Bill Nelson got on the NASA presser and then announced Artemis 2 had been delayed to 2026. So it's like two kind of opposite things there, but yeah.
I would completely agree with that. This definitely is a very surprising choice, and I was not expecting it. We did talk about that, a couple of weeks ago after the nationwide poll for the election. And I think that, first of all, he's a great choice in terms of that he's a true believer. He does want, amazing things to be able to happen, and not just for, rockets and meat bags like some of us here are big supporters of, but also for the science missions. And, I had known that he had done that study about potentially using a Dragon capsule to reboost and potentially service the Hubble Space Telescope, but I didn't know how extensive that actually was, and that there was an unfunded Space Act agreement with NASA in order to study that idea. And at the time, in 2022 and early 2023, they had chosen not to pursue that. But some of the things that were lacking in that proposal have now come to be. They've proven that they can do EVAs from the Dragon capsule, although there's more tests that they would need to do with that in order to be outside and be in like daylight operations to actually be able to handle and service the Hubble Space Telescope. But even if not, even if just going and having some sort of docking adapter mechanism so that they could latch onto it and boost it to a higher orbit, it's still a really interesting study. So just that alone, he has a little bit of an idea of how the process goes and how things kind of work at NASA, and has that collaboration. I'm sure there was a ton of help that they had too with the training leading up to the Polaris Dawn mission, as well as the Inspiration 4 mission. His company Shift 4 has to comply with government regulations, so he's got a little bit of the stuff there. But I was actually really surprised at how much work his company that he's since sold, but Draken International, that they have government contracts in order to train military aviators, not just Air Force, but also Navy and Marine Corps, and do real life, in flight war games to do simulations of, training them with, aircraft that would potentially be used by potential enemies. So that is a really impressive thing. He since has sold that company to BlackRock International, unfortunately, but he still had to go through that process in order to get to that point, to get those government contracts in order to train aviators and to do all sorts of different support missions. It's not just the training. They actually are like a reserve Air Force in a weird way. If ever there was any weird, crazy situation where there was a invasion of the United States proper, they are technically a reserve force that could be called into action. And that just blows my mind. So the amount of contracting and the amount of stuff that goes into getting to that point is a lot. It's a lot. So that alone.
Is this like a shadow military sort of thing?
Kinda. It's like a private Air Force.
Hold up. That doesn't fucking scare anyone?
What scares me is that BlackRock now owns it. That scares the crap out of me. I was okay with him before then, but whether or not they have any munitions is another story, because with the war game stuff, it's all just, non-lethal munitions. And, it's like with other war game training situations where when they fire a missile, they don't actually fire the missile, but, everything else.
It's just Nerf guns.
Sure. But
just those guns.
The change there is just a switch.
Yeah, essentially. So, but that reserve status does mean that they do have at least a little bit, enough to at least make those airplanes effective, unless they're only doing like surveillance or something like that. So it's a bit interesting. So he has already divulged himself from that. So that's not any sort of conflict of interest, I guess. The big question I have,
wait. Divulged or divested?
Divested, because he sold the company. So
okay.
They still like cooperate with him. Like, he's welcome to go and fly those planes anytime, but he technically doesn't own it anymore.
He sold the company.
Yeah. He's not CEO. He doesn't manage any part of it anymore, but he's the one who got it going to back in like 2012 and 2015, I believe, was when they got their first contract. So that sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that y'all might be surprised, and I'm saying surprised like where did he come from and why was he chosen? But his net worth and government contracts lead me to believe that there's a different story there. His accomplishments aside, and whether or not, whether you think his activities or political leanings are obscured by his social media posts or not, being a business owner, I would almost guarantee that there's more Republican than Democrat in him. It's just kind of a loose and fast rule that if you're a business owner, you're more likely to be a Republican than a Democrat, just because Republicans are typically better for business, not necessarily better for the country. But it's this whole thing smacks of just another peg from the same basket. To me, it just it doesn't give me good feelings.
Yeah.
And while I agree that SLS should probably die and probably should have died a long time ago, the notion that NASA should be a broker for private spaceflight, I think, is not a new one and still aligns with NASA's edict. However, my fear is that there isn't going to be sufficient money inside of NASA for at least the next 4, maybe 10 years to do the kinds of research that explorers want to do about the universe, and rather will just be a funnel through which private companies can get government contracts in a more efficient manner. In my mind, NASA should be the one doing things that private industry doesn't yet see as financially viable, and should be on the absolute cutting edge of research and technology, because private industry doesn't see a market in it yet. So NASA shouldn't be a funnel through which we just get government contracts and we just launch rockets. Like, that's not what they're for. NASA is for exploration. NASA is for the advancement of science, the advancement of technology, and doing the things that are thus far too risky for private industry to get into with industry partners.
Yeah.
So it's not like giving SpaceX all the contracts because their rockets work, and making sure that, mark my words, it should be, the hypersonic research that we're doing, to a point. That's more of a military advantage sort of thing, and I don't think NASA has a whole lot to do there, but there may be some crossover. It should be autonomous landing research, and I totally understand SpaceX is a big part of that, but there are other companies that have been, for example, Maston, and I think the development of shit that ain't exist yet, where
we should get back to that.
Where NASA's purse strings is what needs to exist in order to be able to fund and develop that, so that we can go back to exploring the moon and put humans on Mars and things of that nature. And I understand that there's a lot of companies that are after those goals. So NASA's job should be to find and contract with those companies to develop these leading edge programs that are just like literally on the cutting edge of what's possible. Not the status quo, not the big business, not the old space, giving Boeing all kinds of fat or pork in their bellies to
Right.
make sure that they have a jobs program. Like, this jobs program shit is not like, let's keep jobs. Let's keep jobs. Absolutely. Let's keep jobs. But let's put all those people to work doing shit that ain't been done yet. Not rehashing the same concepts from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would love to see things go back to like the late 90s where they're developing new technologies that then are open for any company to grab and develop. You know, Pika
Yeah,
heat shield is a great example, or Transhab, the inflatable modules. It's a great example.
or the balloon velocity retarding systems, so that something
Yeah,
blows up and creates a big like that kind of stuff. I'm all
that's really
behind.
cool. Yeah.
Like, let's figure out how to do shit ain't been done yet.
Hmm.
Not just give money to people that private companies that have some sort of mastery of a skill needed to get to space, and make sure that they're doing all of the things. And yeah. Courtney says NASA's been underfunded for decades, and has been a funnel for money to go to their contractors the whole time. Hopefully, we can get a change where we see some more education encroachments than we otherwise would. And like, we need to get back uh, to exploring and discovering,
Hmm.
rather than sustaining jobs.
Hmm.
And I don't see that happening with this administration.
Real quick, I do need to make one correction. Joshua Collins, thank you for pointing this out. I'm mistaken. It was he sold Draken International to Blackstone, not BlackRock. I get them confused all the time. Thank you for keeping me honest. Um, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with what you said, Detta. And you know, if kind of on the education stuff, I've always been kind of disappointed that the education outreach, the STEM outreach that they do, is generally geared towards elementary school and sometimes junior high. I'm like, why aren't we doing this for high school kids? Why aren't we getting high school kids involved and having them building CubeSat experiments and things like that? There is stuff with universities, but then that's kind of a different kind of thing. It's not necessarily in the same office. Um, and I would like to
Even if
see
it's
that.
even if it's not in the same office, it's still valuable. And
Right.
another thing that's
Yeah.
valuable that they did really, really well was socials. You go back to the days of NASA socials, or space tweet ups, and taking
Yeah.
X out of that for a second. Uh, the outreach that they did, and the ability that they had to be able to gather a handful of people together and show them the inner workings of what NASA did, I think went a super, super long way of sparking interest in the kinds of exposure that you get now from like Tim Dodd,
Mm-hmm.
where the normal average, like I've been to two of them. The normal average person doesn't get to go to Edwards Air Force Base and stand next to a Predator that they use for aerodynamics research, or stand next to a Learjet, a G5 that they use for a morphing wing shape to improve lift, and they don't expose you to that. Like, all that information is there, but you need to know where to find it. They ran us through everything that they were doing at that center, and had us they put one of us in a SR or a U2 pressure suit, and fed us the food that a U2 pilot would get on a mission. Like, where do you get that? Where can you find? Tell me where you can find that. But we got to share it with the world. There were no restrictions on what we were able to post. Everything that they presented to us was cleared and curated, and like, they showed us what they were doing, and there were some super fantastic, like, fascinating technologies. Like, they had a technology for airplane performance that they could put on an SD card in a smartphone, and it had a point map of the entire planet, and it knew where you were. So with a GPS and this point map and a couple of performance aspects of this aircraft, you could fly the aircraft into a situation that you as a pilot would not be able to get out of, and this software would take control and get you into a safe position. And the whole point behind it was, like, F-16 pilots were getting too focused on their target when they were doing strafing runs, and then would be running into the ground. And they put this software on to save the plane and to save the pilot. They put this software on a mission, And this pilot was doing his thing, and then he got all pissed off because the software took over, and he went into the program manager's desk and said, "What the hell?" And they went back and looked at the footage, and the footage shows that the software actually saved his life because he didn't realize he was 6 feet below the envelope that he needed to be in order to be able to pull out of a ravine that he was heading himself into. So if it weren't for that software, he would have died. And he's like, "Oh, shit. Sorry, I apologize.
Complaint
You have my full support. You have saved my life. I am now in your debt." But like that kind of technology, like where are you going to get that? Is private industry going to give you that? No. NASA gives you that. That's the kinds of things that NASA should be working on. And it was fantastic. And this was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Like, come on. That kind of stuff is just priceless. And the return on investment, like we went through this the administration before the administration. Like the return on investment on NASA dollars is just insane compared to like all the other government programs.
Oh yeah.
Like there is no way that NASA has ever been properly funded. And
Yeah, Massimo brings a good point. NASA's not underfunded. It has plenty of money. They just spend it badly, like most of the government agencies. There's actually a couple.
Yes and no. Yes and no, but the it's not NASA that's spending it badly. It's the people that are making decisions for what NASA is supposed to do that are spending it badly. And that's Congress, and that's all jobs programs, and Congress won't fund exploration. It's not NASA's fault.
Yeah.
That's not explicitly NASA's fault, and I'll have to caveat and say that NASA does play their part in it, but it's much less than you think.
I mean, SLS was already canceled once back when it was Ares, and I remember back in like the
Ares
2010s,
Ares 1X, the worst
2011.
rocket ever.
Oh no, let's not get into that discussion. But I remember
Not even going to touch it.
I remember sitting down and having a conversation with Charlie Bolden, and this was off the record at the time. He confirmed that everyone at NASA in the 2011-2010 timeframe hated it. They hated that they were now forced to have to continue with SLS and Orion. They were so frustrated and so angry about it, but at the same time, we're like, well, it's not like we're a private company and can do whatever we want. Like these are the people that control our budget, so we have to do it. It is now law.
It's time for SLS to die. It is. And I know that there's been advancements and blah blah blah. They spent 10 years developing a RS-25 from an existing functioning RS-25. Big fucking deal. But the design of that rocket was an edict from Congress in order to be able to keep jobs and keep money rolling out of districts that were supporting space shuttle. Mm-hmm. And all of the design, the hardware, that whole thing was intended to save money. And it's time for all of us to say, "Oh shit, we were bamboozled. We were lied to. This isn't the thing that we bought. This isn't the thing that we were hoping to get, and it needs to die." Now, that said, I don't think that SpaceX is the only replacement that could use funding to be able to make that happen.
Agree.
Because if we do that, if we go, okay, SLS no more, okay, let's go SpaceX, we're doing the same fucking thing where we have a single source and a single point failure.
Yep.
And if we do that, we are just dooming ourselves into repeating the same history. We need more than one to have more than one company, more than one launch vehicle, more than one possibility for the support of the kinds of things that we want to get done. Mm-hmm. And a single point failure, you look at every time there was an issue on shuttle, and we had Columbia, we had Challenger, and after each of those, we were shut down. We couldn't get people into space for a year or more without having to contract with Russia. I don't think that that's a viable plan anymore. It's a bad situation to paint ourselves into, and I think it's bullshit that nobody sees that. It's just
Something that blows my mind is that this week we are celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the first test flight of Orion on Delta IV Heavy. 10 years, guys. It has been 10 years, and we've only gotten 2 test flights, and both of them's had problems. We've spent over $45 billion plus on SLS, Orion, and the mobile launchers, which are just, there's so many problems with it. And I completely agree with you that, I think it's time that we just need to cut our losses and not just cancel SLS, but cancel Orion too, because a lot of these big issues are with Orion. We have all this stuff about the heat shield, which is just blows my mind that they have decided, you know what, instead of doing skip reentry, we're just going to do direct reentry and hope for the best. According to their data, it'll work better at the high temperatures than at low temperatures, but it's just like, I feel really bad for those astronauts. I would really be curious to know what they really think and if they're actually confident that they would be willing to fly on it. I'm talking about the crew of Artemis too. So I don't know.
I have to disagree with you on cancelling Orion at the same time as cancelling SLS. I love SLS and I love Orion. I like Orion. What it's meant to be able to do. Right, it's meant to be the 21st century Apollo capsule or what have you. I don't think it is actually that. I think SpaceX has shown there is a very different future that we are about to embark on, but Orion is there nonetheless. SLS because it's like big shuttle with bigger boosters, with more engines, with a bigger fuel. It's an awesome big rocket, but it's an old design, right? The SLS is not a 21st century rocket. It's a 20th century rocket, right? Because its life began in the 20th century. So that's what it is, right? But it's like,
1991.
I like old Land Rover Defenders, right? You can like old things, but it's not the greatest car, the most efficient car, the most, accessible car that's ever been manufactured, right? So you can make cooler, sleeker stuff, but still like the old stuff. But you can also see where it's like, all right, maybe it's time we retire this era of rocketry. So in my opinion, I personally think SLS should survive for Artemis 2 to conduct that flight with Orion. But once we get beyond Artemis 2, I really think it starts to make sense to scrap SLS from that point onwards. Because in my opinion, but keeping Orion alive for a few missions beyond Artemis 2, because in my opinion, if we cut SLS right now, Artemis 2, which has just been delayed to 2026, will be delayed to 2027, 2028, because there just isn't a rocket ready, there isn't a capsule ready to conduct the Artemis 2 mission profile other than SLS and Orion right now. So we'd be delaying that mission even further down the road. I think we are getting to the point where Orion would need to be phased out, maybe after Artemis 4 or 5, but again, there is no vehicle currently in development for the short term that would be able to conduct an atmospheric re-entry from the moon. Orion is the only crew capable spacecraft which is able to do that right now and probably within the next 3-4 years. I honestly do not think Starship will be capable of doing a crewed atmospheric re-entry through Earth's atmosphere from the moon by the time frames of Artemis 4, Artemis 5, say. Maybe it will be down to some sort of LEO to the moon transfer vehicle. Maybe that'll be a possibility, but I don't see Starship being able to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere with a crew on board, or rather be certified to re-enter Earth's atmosphere with a crew on board before the Artemis 4-5 time frame, which is why I think it makes sense to keep Orion around for that period, but phase out the vehicles much sooner than NASA was originally intending.
Your words "crew capable" are doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
I mean,
As somebody who also likes classic rovers, you have to be able to admit that a classic rover is not the tool that you want to do your daily commuting in if you drive for an hour or more. and it's not a fuel efficient vehicle that you need in order to be able to drive from the north of London to the south, or from the north of England to the south of England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of agree with Aravel here, where he thinks that, I think what you're saying is likely to happen, though there is an alternative architecture, Dragon plus 2 human lander starships, which is already on the critical path. So I think that could happen. And I mean, SpaceX even at one point had the idea of doing a gray Dragon and outfitting the Dragon capsule with extra radiation protection and whatnot so that it could survive and bring crews safely. But there, again, you're right. There would be a little bit more work that would need to be done in order to make that to happen.
Yeah.
The
I
big
think there's a whole spectrum here, though, because at one end of the scale, you can cancel SLS tomorrow, right? I think that would be a mistake, but you can cancel SLS tomorrow and do a Dragon to Leo, HLS to lunar orbit, and then another vehicle to the surface, right? At the other end of that spectrum, you've got the Oh, hi, Jared.
Hi,
We finally
Jared.
managed to
We
get it
made it.
working.
Woo.
I'm here. I'm here. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Okay. I'll just quickly wrap up my point. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the original SLS will do everything, Orion will do everything, NASA will develop everything, or that kind of, right? So it's where do we lie? Right now, I think we're about here in the spectrum, right? Because we have NASA getting the astronauts to lunar orbit, we have HLS, or the current contracts, right? We have SLS getting the astronauts to lunar orbit, private industry getting them to the surface, not the service. I think my opinions lie about here, but I think we could see a reality here where SLS flies Artemis 2, Orion flies Artemis 2, and after that point, we do a Dragon to Leo, vehicle to lunar orbit, and then HLS to the surface. Something along those lines. I think that's possible. It's just I'm a bit more conservative than that.
I'll tell you what the answer is. You need an interface that makes every payload and every vehicle agnostic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Completely agree.
You need a common standard that everything needs that is flexible enough so that everything can be evolved into that standard, and you can accommodate different sizes, different masses, different propellants, etc., that would make every payload agnostic of the vehicle and every vehicle agnostic of the payload. You're not developing a vehicle for a specific payload for a specific purpose. You're not developing a payload for a specific vehicle for a specific purpose. If those become interchangeable, then you have the ability to flex, and the SpaceX has an anomaly, and they have an FAA investigation that needs to happen that's delaying them for 6 months. All right, go on an Atlas. You like that kind of interchangeability and variance in size and mass and propellant load and electrical requirements and all of that would give you the flexibility to be able to launch when you need to launch, regardless of what's available. Mm-hmm. And have things available regardless of what's available, what needs to be launched.
Mm-hmm. And especially to tag on to that
answer.
idea, especially if we have multiple providers, it's like if one fails, it's all good. We can go get the same exact, adapter or upper stage or whatever part it is that we need from this other contractor who's doing the same thing and has their own business case to use it for their own purposes. But I mean, I think that could be possible because we already kind of have that with the international docking adapter, which Josh Collins and a couple others, Jay Keegan, brought up. I think that's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't care what kind of car my Uber driver drives. I just need to get there.
Yeah. To kind of tag on to Ryan's point a second ago, let's put our political intrigue hat on for a second. This is why I think that they've started stacking Artemis 2 and are starting to put that together to kind of keep at least Artemis 2, that SLS, cancel proof. Because by stacking it and putting it together, it would make it even more expensive on NASA to cancel the program. Because it's not just a cancel, okay, we're done. Like, you have to close out the contracts and you have to do all of this stuff to get it done. I mean, there was something around the tune of close to $2 billion when the Constellation program was canceled, that were closeout costs that were then just kind of funneled into, oh wait, just kidding, continue, but with these new design changes with the SLS. So, you know, I think that's why they have done this, is to keep Artemis 2 from being canceled, to keep it being cancel proof.
Yeah.
Nothing's cancel proof. If there's money still to be spent, nothing is cancel proof.
Well, Jared, hi, welcome.
Hi.
It's so good to see you, buddy.
Man, I'm glad to
you
be
made
here
it.
finally.
What the hell did you just walk into?
I was about to say, I'm sitting over here with my hands crossed very quietly because I know I'm just, yeah. Where shall I begin, or where do you want me to begin?
Well,
So-
I would like to ask you, what do you think about the nomination of Jared Isaacman? Do you think that he's going to do a good job? Do you think that he's going to get blocked at every single turn? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it is certainly a very interesting nomination. Let's be honest here, with the amount of influence that Elon is holding with the Trump administration, this was not a Trump decision. This was Elon sort of telling Trump what to do.
Probably.
And as to whether that was a bad thing or not, I don't know. But for Mr. Isaacman, I don't really want to call him Jared, because as far as I'm concerned, there can only be one Jared in space, and I'm already here. I think I do not foresee him being anything less than a good NASA administrator. He's got the flight chops. He's got the understanding as to how things work from the missions operations side. He's run an aerospace company for quite a long time. He understands what it takes for these things to actually work. So to me, this was not a bad choice. I don't necessarily know if I would have done it with someone who's as close to being into the realm of conflict of interest as he could possibly engage. As to whether I think a administrator Isaacman would do things like that, I don't think so. He's not a dumb guy. Okay, he's pretty smart about how he does this stuff, right? He's proven that time and time again. But it is still one of those things that you need to just make sure that an eye is kept, if he does end up becoming NASA administrator, that no favoritism or things is being thrown around like that. And that's just simply for the fairness of competition that we have right now, and we just want to maintain that. Again, I don't think he would actually do that, but it is one of those things that just, it would be a continuation of what we do with everybody to make sure that it just stays fair in the competitions that we have. I actually don't think that he would down select just to one company and make it SpaceX. He doesn't seem to be that kind of a person when it comes to space flight. So I think he's got a pretty good head on his shoulders, and I think a lot of the people freaking out are I don't want to necessarily say unnecessarily doing so, but I think there was a lot of freaking out just for the sake of freaking out. And I don't know if it's a big surprise or not to people that I am pretty comfortable with this pick, but even though I know who picked him. But at the same time, I don't foresee anything bad happening, honestly, under if he becomes NASA administrator. I think a lot of people are forgetting about the fact that these positions have to be confirmed by a Senate vote.
Right.
So still got to roll through that. They're probably going to call him. He's probably going to have to go through a hearing or two with the Senate in order to establish things like that. But also, it's really hard to look at somebody who's got flight experience twice and end up going that way. And yeah, I'm not a doomer in choice on Mr. Isaacman becoming NASA administrator. I think he would make a good one.
Thus far, this is one of the most confirmable picks in the cabinet.
And honestly, I think that the only problem there might be, which they might not even address, is that supposedly he has stock. He's bought in some of the personal shares from an employee, I guess. I don't know how he was able to do that, but he owns stock in SpaceX. And so I could see that as being a source of contention of, hey, NASA administrators awarded contracts to SpaceX. He owns stock in SpaceX. This ain't right. That's the only issue I see.
If you've got a lot of money to invest, Elon is listening. They're not open.
Yes.
They're not publicly traded because Elon wants to retain control. But if you have a lot of money to invest, there are ways to invest it. That's not a surprise to me.
Yeah, I think also a lot of people in Congress would also have to answer to questions like that as well. Let's face it. If there's anything we learned in the third and fourth week of March 2020, it was certainly that there are a large number of congressional representatives that should also answer those kinds of questions as well. So, yeah. It was very much a who's who
So
of
Giovanni
wasn't doing it.
Esposito asked if there's a statement from Jared Isaacman, and Mike just pulled this up.
Yep.
I am honored to receive President Trump's nomination to serve as the next administrator of NASA. Having been fortunate to see our amazing planet from space, I am passionate about America leading the most incredible adventure in human history. On my last mission to space, my crew and I traveled farther from Earth than anyone in over half a century. I can confidently say that this second space age has only just begun. Space holds unparalleled potential for breakthroughs in manufacturing, biotechnology, mining, and perhaps even pathways to new sources of energy. There will inevitably be a thriving space economy, one that will create opportunities for countless people to live and work in space. At NASA, we will passionately pursue these possibilities and usher in an area where humanity becomes a true spacefaring civilization. And
he goes on,
That's
but
it.
yeah, he goes on, but good things. I especially like this part where he says, "We will inspire children, yours and mine, to look up and dream of what is possible. Americans will walk on the moon and Mars, and in doing so, we will make life better here on Earth." So, I think that's
keep
great.
that up. Walk on the moon.
I think someone in the chat room was asked was it? Oh, go ahead, Dada.
That seems relatively genuine, to be fair.
I think so.
There's at no point have I ever felt that Mr. Isaacman has ever been anything less than genuine about his love of aerospace and spaceflight and his passion for leading the charge on that. I mean, this was a guy willing to drop the money to go fix Hubble. I don't understand how you can look at that and say that that's terrible. Like, that's awful. This is going to end
That's
poorly.
not for financial gain. That's not for profit. That's because you love something so much.
Again,
you want to improve
true
humanity's
believer.
knowledge of the universe, right? That's not something you do to make a quick buck.
Yes, and that's why I very much believe that a lot of people a lot of the dooming over the choice of Mr. Isaacman is from this idea that he's going to simply move the focus entirely to human spaceflight and forget about the science side of things. But you don't forget about the science side of things if you propose to spend your own money on fixing Hubble yourself on behalf of NASA.
Yeah.
He is very much going to be deeply involved in the science aspect of things as well. He's just so bullish on everything NASA. Like, there really hasn't ever been a point where I've seen anything from him that would concern me too much about that. And yeah, it's just only thing, conflict of interest, but that's, that sort of hangs over everybody's head at some point, right? So we just kind of have to deal with that.
This would speak to the character and the type of person the type of leader that he would make. Is he a Jeff Bezos space traveler, or is he my heart is soft enough to be a William Shatner space traveler?
Interesting way of putting that.
Was he affected by the pale blue dot effect?
Oh, I would think so. And he's not going to be the first NASA administrator to be an astronaut. There's been Bill Nelson. Charles Bolden, Richard Truly. So it's a great list of people to be a part of.
But the best of them have been humbly decimated by their traveling to space.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think there's very few people who are not humbled by that experience.
But they exist.
Yes, and we have certainly met at least one we can think of. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways.
Here's an interesting point that I think might have a good thing. Alex M brings up. I'm concerned that Old Space could sue Isaacman Musk as an excuse to sue NASA for any decisions that don't go their way and delay things. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit worried about that too. I hope that they don't go the Blue Origin route of suing things to get their way. That's not entirely fair, but a little bit. But something else that I
Well, I
see
mean,
that might.
let's be
I,
fair. SpaceX has done that as well.
I was
Yeah.
about to say, yeah, this is welcome to aerospace.
Yeah.
You have a great legal team at your aerospace company for certain reasons, and they are not necessarily to enforce copyrights or patents. Sometimes
It's not just for ITAR compliance.
No, it is. If
It
you
can be
don't
pretty
think there's
cutthroat.
legal, if you don't think there's law-based warfare happening between aerospace companies on the regular, let me tell you something. Have I got some beachfront property at Edwards Air Force Base to sell you? If you believe that, so
John Manderson says putting money over ethics is the start of the end of any healthy business.
Yep.
it definitely does not help. That's for sure. So.
Something though that does give me a little bit of encouragement when it comes to Old Space is, Boeing is already looking to get out of the space industry entirely. Lockheed Martin is slowing down a bunch of their stuff and is having problems with their satellite buses. Nobody wants to buy their crap anymore, especially since there's way cheaper options available. And like they might just be okay with it because let's be honest, the space industry part of those companies' businesses is pennies compared to the money that they're getting from all the defense contracts. Let's be honest, all of the aid that we've sent to Ukraine has went directly to Lockheed and Northrop Grumman and Boeing, and a couple other companies too. But let's be real, the money that they get from NASA is nothing compared to their other more profitable businesses. So we might not see too much pushback from them, and they might be grateful to get out of it. Just
Yeah.
trying to be optimistic.
Yeah, it's a good perspective to take, to be optimistic. I don't want to necessarily say prepare for the worst and the best will happen, but it's yeah. I think if Isaacman is confirmed as NASA administrator, those first 6 months are going to be really really interesting to see what he does, if there's any changes made, and other things like that. It's definitely interesting to look at the differences between this selection of relative the last two outsiders that we've had selected on things, which I would describe Jim Bridenstine as initially starting out as somewhat of an outsider at NASA and things like that, where his selection was sort of not looking particularly good at first. And I know I was definitely a person who was very publicly loud about how I didn't think that was a good selection, and then through the years, basically got shown up and still to this day profusely apologized for being 4,000% wrong about Jim Bridenstine as a NASA administrator, which is great. I love it when that happens.
Absolutely.
But I think
Thank
that's
you, Dave.
yeah, thanks, Dave. As good as getting 5 folks into our members show. So yeah, we'll see.
Airville brings up a question I wanted to ask you guys too. Any predictions for who will be deputy administrator? I'll go first. I would still love to see Jeff Grayson be a part of it, and I think that he would be the wise advisor to help Jared Isaacman navigate this new role if he gets confirmed. Still an if. But what do you guys think, Ryan? Who would you like to see as deputy administrator?
I'll be honest. I haven't really thought about it. I'm not sure, to be honest. I think there's plenty of people who would work for that role. Former astronauts or astronauts on the brink of retirement. Not saying that I want anyone to no longer be an astronaut, but people who've served NASA for their whole careers, who are now getting to the end of their astronaut serving career, rather, who would perhaps want a new office job, maybe could get the step up to deputy admin.
Let's be fair and acknowledge the pattern that for this administration, industry qualifications are not a requirement.
Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut for deputy administrator.
No, he's not a billionaire.
Oh, you're right.
I'll be honest. I was not expecting. Jared Isaacman being nominated for administrator was like this high in the sky, imaginary potential dream in this kind of fluffy heavenly world with rainbows everywhere, right? Or at least that was the case until last Wednesday when it actually happened. So I don't know. Maybe Tim Dodd will become deputy administrator. I don't know. Anything is possible now. At least that's what it feels like. Anything is possible. Maybe Mike, you'll be the next deputy administrator. I don't know. I don't know.
I would accept. I would gladly accept.
I'll make a daring prediction and say that there are an infinitesimal number of people that are infinitely more qualified of whoever will be chosen.
Yeah. I also want to give a big shout out to Beast Pace 777 who just gave us a $4.99 super chat. Question for more knowledgeable people: how can Starship withstand Mars temperatures and radiation, then relaunch back to Leo without boil off or damaging hull? I don't think I am one of those knowledgeable people. I think that it can't. I think there is a little bit of boil off and a little bit of damage, but it's going to be a cycler. It's not going to go from Mars surface back to Earth surface, I think.
Boil off is a given. Boil off happens on Earth, so you just have to. That's a cost of the fuel that you're using, and you have to account for that in the timeline. And boil off is not a function of flight regime. It is a function of time from when it was filled. And you have to constantly vent that in order to prevent pressurization of the tanks. As for the structure, I think the materials that the vehicle is made of will well handle all of the radiation and temperature shifts, except the electronics, which will just get blasted by radiation, and if you don't protect against that or have redundancies around built around that, you will see the result. But yeah, boil off is there's nothing you can do about retaining boil off other than making a tank boil off proof, in which case it's just holding gas, which is not an efficient way to transport your fuel.
No.
Can you re-chill the vapor? Yes, you can. Mm-hmm. But it's not easy.
It's a lot of energy to do that.
And it's not efficient.
And it's heavy.
No, not at all. Yeah, I was going to say, I figured in situ resource utilization handles most of your boil off problems that you would have. I'm assuming this is specific to boil off on Mars, like you've landed on Mars and everything. I've unfortunately lost the question and I can't see it on the screen. Yeah, your in situ resource utilization should handle something like that. Really the big issue in terms of generating your fuel and oxidizer for Starship, liquid oxygen and methane, would be the amount of hydrogen you have available to allow yourself to do something like that in the reactions you would have to work with. The stoichiometry of those reactions means that you have to have a certain amount of hydrogen, and you're either going to import that and basically bring it with you, or you're going to have to find a ton of a tremendous amount of water on Mars, easily present and easily grabbable, in order for you to actually pull something like that off. So yeah, it's not there was that experiment on Perseverance that was able to take a Martian atmosphere and change it into oxygen, I believe is what they were doing. But the reaction to take Martian atmosphere and hydrogen that is present and turn it into methane is a lot harder, and it's a lot more energy intensive, and chemistry wasn't my best subject in college, but boy, it's tough to do that kind of stuff and to do it right. Oh man, in the scales that you would have to fill up a Starship. Yowza. So good luck to whoever has to do those chemistry equations in those
Yeah.
chemical engineering designs. I do not envy those people at all.
The person to ask for that is a dude named George Sowers. He was working at United Launch Alliance and was the guy behind the ACES and NASA spaceflight. I'm not sure who's commenting for them right now, but if that's Chris, hi Chris. They figured it out with their ACES upper stage, and the idea is that they would be able to prevent boil off and be able to recycle that, and through the system be able to generate electricity for the stage, and be able to use as much fuel as possible and refuel them. Unfortunately, they didn't move forward with it, probably because of money. It's always bloody me. Good. Well, thank you for joining us, Chris. It's great to see you. Yeah, they have that figured out. George Sowers is a legend, and I would really like to see him involved with this sort of stuff too. Like, in fact, in my dream world right now, if they don't get involved with...
They have that figured out, or they have that conceptualized?
Nope, they have it figured out. They did a bunch of tests.
Okay.
According to George Sowers, they did ground tests and, proprietary information, so they can't sell it, but that they figured it out. Like, the next step was literally to scale and launch.
Because I would be curious if that actually scales, and you can maintain the process over a long period of time.
Yeah.
I am by no means an expert, but in the experience that I've had, when you keep a tank full of cryogenics up to operating pressure for a long period of time, the quality of the liquid goes to shit, and it doesn't behave the way you expect it to. So I would be very curious to see how that's actually achieved and how that functions over a long duration.
Yeah.
I wonder if there is anything that you can pull from NASA's current stock that would allow you to do something like that. Like, you look at the JW, right? That thing is a tennis court that's staying at about 50 Kelvin, and even some areas are down below that temperature. We're talking, like, how long has it been that cold for? Like, almost 3 years now. Like, that's a very long period of time to keep your large area that cold. So it's not. I don't think it's impossible. It's just that the right kind of system has to be there. Unless I am completely out of my depth here in what we're talking about. So,
but that's just keeping it from sun exposure through multiple layers of foil as insulation, foil with an air.
Well, there's also an active cryocooling system on board of JW, because there are certain instruments that need to be even colder than other systems. So yeah.
Like it's much like refrigeration. Like we figured out refrigeration such that we can make a refrigerator that works for years and years on end, right? That's not that big of a deal. The difference that you're talking about is shifting the temperature band cold enough that you have the ability to wick heat out of something and pull it into the liquid, and then pull the heat out of the liquid in another location and cycle that through a closed loop system, right? That is possible. That is well possible. We do that. That's a refrigerant system that's air conditioning for your car, air conditioning for your building. Every refrigerator uses that concept. And there's multiple different materials. We use ammonium on the space station. We use R34, R32, whatever the fuck the current chemical is that we use in refrigerant systems in the United States. Other countries may use something that's a little more outdated or a little more advanced, depending on where you are and what their political leanings are. But there's multiple ways to do that. Boil off is a different problem in that you don't ever have the temperature fluctuation between warmer than your material and colder than your material in order to be able to contain that. If you have a tank on Earth in the middle of Mojave that has liquid nitrogen in it, you're never going to get to the point where you have something that's colder than liquid nitrogen to recondense that gas into something that's usable, right? The problem is you have to work within that temperature range of the environment that you're operating in. If you're talking about space, then yes, there may be a potential for being able to put something, a radiator into space, in shade, protected from solar radiation and the abstract heat from other things around you, that you actually do get that temperature swing to below the temperature of you that recondenses the fluid that you're working with. But on Mars, I don't think that that's exactly the case.
Yeah, no, the surface temperature of Mars is on average. Oh my gosh, what is it? I'm having to figure out. What's it, like maybe negative 60 Celsius on average, something like that. So
And liquid nitrogen is negative 168.
yeah, I mean, at night you can dip down really cold on Mars, cold enough that your electronics will stop working unless you keep them hot, relatively hot, right? Um, but even then, that's still not going to be cold enough. So yeah, and I would imagine it's going to be significantly harder to make things colder on the surface of Mars because you have an atmosphere around, as opposed to in space where you can just radiate stuff and then also shield it as well from sunlight and prevent it from that. So. Yeah, and just kind of, I just wanted to demonstrate this a little bit, which is that you could still get the data as to what the temperatures are on JW at the moment, and the sun-facing side of JW at the moment is at 50 degrees Celsius, and then the MIRI NIRCam near spec instrument suite is sitting at negative 267 degrees Celsius. And they're only just a couple meters away from each other. So, so that's the power of being able to do it in space. But on a surface like here at Earth or at Mars, but you bring up a great point, which is that you have to get it cold, and you have to maintain that cold, and it's significantly more difficult to maintain that cold in an atmosphere than it is, say, in a vacuum where you can really block it. So,
thank you, Zapfan, for the correction.
Zapfan.
Negative
It's been a while.
196. It's funny. It's like a USB cable. We always have to do it twice in order to be able to get.
Yeah, USB's
LN2 is negative 196. I was thinking of methane, which is 168 or thereabouts. Sorry.
Well, still, you have to think about cold temperatures. So it's cold.
Thermodynamics is way more complicated in practice than it sounds in principle, and a big part of why a civil engineer and not any other type. Yes, I agree.
Yes.
Me too.
Oh, man, it was murder.
Very quickly, I've been looking through the chat over the last few minutes, and back to the deputy administrator thing. I've seen a lot of names, so I'm just going to run through a few of them here because we've got some interesting ideas, shall we say. Whether any of these are realistic or not, that's another question. But whatever, we're just naming names. So we have Ellen, what's the word I'm looking for? Suggested, that's the word I'm looking for. Who suggested Garrett Reisman, who spends I'm not sure what his official title is, but he works with the California Science Center because he was on the live stream when Endeavour got lifted into position in January, I think, of this year. We have Kerry saying that Jared should be deputy.
Is Garrett
we get the
still
two Jareds?
Wasn't Garrett
No.
still employed by Vast?
Yeah, he's a consultant advisor for them for the, I'm guessing, to help test out and make sure that their life support systems and things like that are good.
Formerly of SpaceX?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do not accept the nomination of the administration. Being presently working for two government agencies, my own self, it is a joy to be able to do what we do to the public for the fact that we get to do it for free and the public gets to experience it for free. But at the same time, I am a noted massive thorn in the side of both of the government agencies that I work for. Therefore, because
you're hired.
Inability to understand the concept of bureaucracy and my desire to just get it friggin' done already. It's just not going to end well. So no.
I think Aravale's comment there, saying I think Garrett is an advisor for like half the half the private
Yeah.
space industry at this point, and for all mankind. What if we just get Garrett to advise the entire space industry, and then by the time he gets to NASA, it will no longer be a conflict of interest because he'll be advising everyone equally.
He even teaches at USC here in the Los Angeles area. So like, dude's just he's he's got his finger in every pie in the best way possible. So
Can you imagine what we could accomplish if we all agreed on what needed to happen and we're just down to get it done?
wow, imagine that.
One can dream. One can dream.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
One can.
That's nice, Detta. That's some great wishful thinking, and we appreciate that.
We also had Lunar Orbit suggesting Scott Kelly, and then shortly after, Ellen suggested Mark Kelly. But I feel like they're.
You can change it out.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah.
Maybe the political affiliations there.
Will you
wouldn't
go to work
work,
for me
but-
today?
Yeah. And then someone else in here, I can't find it now, but someone else suggested Chris Hadfield, but I'm not sure if Canadians
He's
are allowed to
Canadian.
serve in the role.
No.
Yeah.
Although here's a good
Wait,
one.
wait, wait.
Imagine if Tory Bruno got it,
Why wouldn't he be able to serve in
because he's Canadian. You can't. You're a Canadian citizen. We don't have non-citizens serving in government agency roles.
Really? Or is that a rule?
I'm pretty sure, and if we do, I would like to know, because all those guys need to get fired and sent back to their home country. That is BS. If we have foreign citizens, like Chris Hadfield, he might have dual citizenship, and if he does, that's okay. But if we have non-American citizens making executive decisions in the American government, they all need to go. Screw that. Screw that. I am not okay with that. I love Chris Hadfield, but I'm not okay with that technicality.
So most federal positions that you're going to have to work in, you either need to be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national in order to do that. There are some exceptions for it. As you can imagine, if someone has a tremendous amount of expertise, I'm sure there's an exception that's going to be made for that. And I mean, it's really hard to argue with expertise, regardless of where you come from. So, yeah. Man, it's complicated.
Here's something that, not to get us on another rabbit hole, but have you guys ever heard of a little company called the Aerospace Corporation?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are a
little
consulting firm that has been around since the 60s. They get almost $2 billion per year from the U.S. government to consult on space projects, and they haven't delivered a freaking report in over 8 years. That needs to go.
I think we can all see Mike is auditioning for the Department of Government Efficiency right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, as far as I know, the two biggest groups that they work with are the United States Space Force and the National Reconnaissance Office. So I'm pretty confident there's a reason we haven't seen a report
It's all classified
from them
or
in
what the
last
heck
8
ever.
years.
I mean,
So,
Jesus Christ, they haven't even updated their website in 20 years. It's freaking... it's freaking HTML script. It's embarrassing. You get $2 billion a year and you're still using HTML script from over 20 years ago? Oof. Where is that money going? Not okay. Anyway, sorry.
Anyways,
hey, who wants to have fun again, and we could get Lori Garver in the deputy administrator role. That would be get her back in that position. And,
I would love her. I don't know if she'd accept, but I would love that.
Yeah, it was an interesting time with her there because boy, she made all the right people angry. That's for sure. So, and she was. I think overall she was great. And by the way, I think it's important to note too that NASA's deputy administrator is essentially. I don't want to necessarily call it day-to-day operations of NASA, but they're sort of an overarching position that kind of makes sure that NASA as a whole is working correctly and reports that directly to the administrator. So it's a bit of a big deal as to who gets chosen and what their philosophies may or may not be on things like that.
Maybe I'm wrong, but and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I've always understood it is the deputy administrator is kind of like from the NASA side of things and understands the NASA side of things, and then the administrator is from the political sphere who kind of like then represents NASA on behalf of the political party they come from. So this situation is like very unprecedented, I think, because I don't think we've ever had like a proper administrator serving from January 20th. We've had acting administrators because usually you wait 7 months before you pick an administrator. And then I don't think we've actually had someone as an administrator who doesn't come, or at least in modern times, from a political party. You know, like Bill Nelson was put in because he's a Democratic senator from Florida who's happened to go to space, right? So I think maybe we could see an administrator that maybe understands NASA and that industry maybe a bit better than previous administrators. You know, I don't want to say like, I've been a fan of Bill Nelson, I've been a fan of Jim Bridenstine. You know, I don't want to say they don't know what they're doing. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. But, you know, Jared Isaacman very clearly knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I want to say the last administrator who served that didn't have what I would call an overarching streak of political work in their life is probably Charles Bolden. He was military before NASA and kind of was with both for a bit of time after his work in the astronaut corps, and kind of stuck around with where. Kind of stuck with, because he was in the Marine Corps, so he stuck with the Marine. He basically was in the Marine Corps, went to NASA, became an astronaut, stuck with the astronaut corps, and then when he left the astronaut corps, he went back into the Marine Corps and worked there. And then after he retired from the military, and then he got put back or nominated for NASA administrator. I think it was 6 or 7 years after he retired, something like that. So I'm also wondering, did Dan Golden have that? Did who came after Dan Golden? I can't. No,
Mike,
not
Griffin.
no, Mike. So no, Dan Golden was up until 2000, I believe, or no, maybe a little bit beyond that. Mike Griffin came in 2005 ish, if I remember correctly. So yeah, there's been a lot of administrators in NASA's history. So yeah, it's a bit. So, but also it would be really good, I think, if deputy administrator had political experience as well, because then it could help Mr. Isaacman navigate the
and that's
political
why
world.
I still would nominate Jeff Grayson. I mean, he was on the Augustine Commission. He is intimately familiar with all of this stuff. So I think that he would be a great advisor and would be able to give him a little bit of teeth, and he would be able to get some stuff done.
Yeah, and Jeff is unbelievably knowledgeable about just about everything too. So solid. I would say that'd be a pretty solid choice, and that'd be a 1992 dream team of administration in spaceflight.
So to answer your question, Mike, according to the Office of Personnel and Management, under Executive Order 11935, only United States citizens and nationals may be appointed to competitive service federal jobs. In rare cases, agencies may hire certain non-citizens when there are no qualified U.S. citizens available, unless an appointment is prohibited by statute. In addition, Congress frequently restricts agencies' abilities to hire non-citizens into the exempted service as well, though through appropriations provisions. So there is a path in which Chris Hadfield could be put in that role. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but in general, it does require them to be a U.S. citizen.
Dave Avery, Sean O'Keefe. That's who we were forgetting, Jared. That was
yes, Sean O'Keefe.
Yeah. Interesting. That's what I thought, Dutta. Thank you for clarifying that and looking that up. Let's see.
So you can sleep. You can sleep tonight.
Okay. Phew. No Chinese nationals abusing my tax dollars. Phew.
Very quickly, I know we're running long here, but I did run some polls during the week. So if I may, I just wanted to quickly bring those up and go through the results of said polls. Now they have concluded. I will start with this one. So essentially, I asked on my X account Now we've seen that Jared Isaacman has been nominated, not Jared Head, for NASA Administrator. I have to clarify that now. What do you think will happen to the following programs? And the first one up was SLS. So the winning answer was, right now it would be entirely scrapped. That's what 39% of people think should happen or will happen. Second place was scrapping Block 1B and Block 2, which would mean only Block 1 would fly, which is Artemis 1, obviously, 2 and 3. Third place is Block 2 scrapped, which would mean seeing, I don't know, I forget when Block 2 is supposed to be introduced. Probably, I don't know, Artemis 15 at this point. Yeah, Artemis 37 at this point. And then 13.1% of people think that the SLS program should survive. The next program is Orion, and the majority of people think Orion should be kept. At least for the time being. Nearly 68% of people, the rest of the votees, think it should be scrapped. Third was Gateway, which was pretty tight. 52.6% think it should be scrapped, 47.4% think it should be kept. So, you know, I'm sure there's some margin of error in there, maybe, which could swing either way. But obviously, the community is nearly evenly divided on that one. And finally, this poll result is the exact opposite to the Gateway one. Everyone thinks that a Hubble servicing mission with Dragon will happen. 84.9%
God, I
of
would
respondees.
love that.
I mean, he might have accepted the role just to approve that, and then he'll quit.
Perhaps. Maybe he'll be
Would he be the first NASA administrator to do a flight while NASA administrator?
That would be amazing.
Honestly, though, I could see him handing it off to somebody else and saying, "Hey, go and get him." You know, go and make my dream happen.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
And
I
honestly,
mean,
it's
I
not
think
his dream; it's a lot of our dreams.
I think I think there's two potential outcomes here. I think Polaris 2 either flies with Scott Kidd Petit as commander, who flew as pilot on Polaris Dawn, or Polaris 2 is just delayed until Jared gets out of office. You know, like I believe he said something like the gap between Polaris 1 and 2 is meant to be like this, approximately the same time frame as the gap between Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn, which was, you know, 3 and a bit-ish years. So maybe we'll see if the original plan was, say, 2027 for Polaris Dawn, Polaris 2, then maybe if he gets out of office in 2028, that's not really that much of a delay. Maybe it'll be worth just holding it off so he can fly as commander on the mission. You know, he's practically entirely paid for.
Right. I would agree with that. Yeah. It wouldn't even be that much of a delay too. So.
Yeah. It'd be, you know, 3 months maybe.
Real quick, I like this recommendation from ZapFan. Jared Head can lead the Science Mission Directorate. There we go. Is that a job that you might accept, Jared?
You know, I might be willing to do something like that.
He might be tempted. All right.
You might be able to tempt me to take on a third government job. So I'm not leaving the two I got right now. I love Griffith and I love working on my space shuttle. So, although I will bring the space shuttle back. Wait, who said that? Who said that?
Oh, we can't afford it, Jared. I'm sorry. Unless we do Reliant Robin, then we can afford it.
Yeah. The problem is every launch will get a copyright strike, so that's a big issue. So.
You win some, you lose some. We just can't stream them.
Not the smartest member show we've ever done. So
we almost have the required expertise to pull that off in this room.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Well, hey, I think we should probably wrap this up and move on over to the member show. This has been a lot of fun and a really interesting discussion. And big thank you to everyone who is supporting the show and has become a member of the show. And a big thank you, too, to Dave Avery, who gifted 5 more memberships so that you can join the member show right after this, where we'll continue this discussion a little bit more, just loose. We're not, and it might not even stay on space. We might get distracted and start talking about some other stuff. But big thank you to everyone who is supporting the show. We wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. And I am extremely grateful to each and every one of you who are able to make this happen. And also, big thank you to Dutta, to Jared, and to Ryan for being here today and joining in this discussion. So thank you very much. We will see you guys next time. Keep moving onwards and upwards, everybody. And don't forget, Ad Astra, to the stars.